As darkness fell, the protests turned violent. There was gunfire. A man has been left critically injured. This was the US town of Ferguson a year after a white police officer shot dead an unarmed black teenager. 12 months ago, the St. Louis suburb was engulfed in days of rioting and arson, sparking rallies across the country and the promise to transform police relations with the black community. But last night, that suburb became a flashpoint again, as our Washington correspondent Kylie Morris reports.
His killing sparked a movement that reverberates still around America.
He made the movement to open up eyes to help other families. Yes. You know, I still look at it, yeah, I lost, but he's still working right now.
Hundreds joined Michael Brown's father at the place where his son's body lay for more than 4 hours after he was shot by the white police officer Tyrone Wilson. The community fought for justice, but no charges were ever laid against the officer. A Department of Justice investigation did, though, find a multitude of cases that proved the black population of Ferguson faced systemic racism from the police for years.
You know, there's been so much violence in the city, you know, and it's my hope, my prayer that sometime we're going to stop the violence.
As night fell, tension built between protesters and the police. They assumed the positions they'd held a year ago on West Florissant. The police filing onto the street in their battle gear with helmets, shields, tear gas and batons. On the sidelines of the protests, attention turned to a small group obscured by darkness.
I'd say this is a good area to be in, not over there. So if you're gonna like sit up over here, get down.
You can see the shots being fired. What followed was a barrage that forced everyone to take cover. Protesters, press and police cowering behind parked cars. By the time the episode was over, an 18-year-old black man lay shot and bleeding.
He's bleeding out, man. Please get him some help, man.
Police say they shot him when he opened fire on their vehicle. His name is Tyrone Harris, and he's now in a critical condition. In the years since Michael Brown was killed, the movement that began with his death shattered the idea of a post-racial America. The images of police in riot gear on suburban streets pushing back against an angry and disenfranchised black population shocked the nation and foreshadowed more deaths, a shameful roll call of police violence that includes the names of Freddie Gray in Baltimore and Eric Garner on Staten Island. His daughter spoke yesterday in Ferguson.
Police are still killing us.
Come on.
It's a crisis that's going on.
The fight against injustice and inequality has forced its way onto middle America's TV screens, even the subject of a question on last week's debate between the Republican Party's presidential candidates.
Many in the Black Lives Matter movement and beyond believe that overly aggressive police officers targeting young African Americans is the civil rights issue of our time. How do you plan to address it?
It's about training.
And on the other side of politics, a weekend rally by Democratic candidate Bernie Sanders was interrupted by Black Lives Matter protesters.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
They accused him of not doing enough to address police brutality. Today, the senator released his new racial justice platform. The killing of black men and women by white police officers is no longer America's secret. It is now an acknowledged truth for which African Americans continue to pay with their lives. Now, though, there is political fallout and even sometimes legal consequences. Perhaps that's something Michael Brown's family can hold on to.
Kylie Morris reporting from Washington. Well, Darryl Parks, the lawyer for the Brown family, joins me now from Florida. Thanks for coming on the program, Darryl Parks. You've just spent the last 5 days in Ferguson, Missouri. Can you shed any more light on what actually happened last night? Who shot first?
Well, I wasn't there, so I can't speculate as to that. However, I think it's important that we tend not to focus on the few agitators who have, chosen to shoot guns. There were thousands of other people who were there, who were doing the right thing and who were part of the process of trying to bring this community together, but more importantly, trying to help this family find a bright spot, if they can, in light of Michael Brown's death 1 year later. So, unfortunately, the attention has been given to the few people I mean, a very, very, very small minority who have chosen violence in this situation. So that's the unfortunate part of the situation. However, a lot of other great things happen as we commemorated and celebrated Michael Brown's 1-year anniversary.
But it is bitterly ironic, isn't it, and very sad that a year on, you've got these appalling flashbacks to the violence that we had 12 months ago. If you were to sum up this rather awful year of police violence and terrible race relations, what, if anything, has actually improved?
What has improved is the awareness in our country. I think for so long there's a big segment in America who ignored or thought that this didn't exist. Starting with last summer, they began to get a very good snapshot of the real reality of what African Americans deal with as it relates to their interaction with the police. And so now they've seen it on video, they've seen the protests, and now it's taken the awakening by the protesters to get the attention of our country and the world as we are now on TV in England, which you watching and observing what's taking place.
You've got a black president, you've got a black attorney general, you've got a black head of Homeland Security, and yet the majority of black citizens in America still don't feel that they're getting a fair shake. How do you explain that?
Well, you know, you said it right. And I think that the people that you saw who don't feel like they're a part right now remains that very small minority of people who are in the streets, who are on the ground, in those communities there in Ferguson. And so until we find a way to reach down to every person, the person who feels disenfranchised, until we find a way to loop them in, to get them to believe and feel that it's not necessary, as they say, to shut it down, to get them to believe that it's sincere, it's genuine, that the hope is real, and that the change is real, and that they're part of that change. Until we do that, I think we still have some work to do.
The president himself has been quite vocal in saying that more also has to be done by the black community in the United States. What do you think the black community should do in order to improve race relations with the white majority?
Well, I think for the most part, I think it's a two-way street. I believe one of the steps in this process is a matter of people getting to know each other. When people tend to get to know each other, they interact differently. So until both sides, both races, all races, find and take advantage of the opportunity to engage one another, to get to know each other, but also to respect the differences that might exist. Until you do that, then you really can't do it. I mean, for example, that's just the way things work, but that's a first step that has to take place to gain an appreciation for one another.
Okay, got to leave it there. Darryl Parks, thank you very much indeed.